like to reference a very pivotal painting in visual art history, that being Picasso's Les Demoiselles. And I'm wondering, how would you go about describing this painting to somebody who perhaps has low vision, has lost vision, has a visual reference in their minds, in contrast to how you would describe this painting to someone who has never had vision before?
When I found out that that question was going to be asked, I was kind of terrified. Because it's a really complicated painting. And I was thinking about, I've seen that painting many times, I've studied it for years, and I was really thinking about this question. And one of my first associations I made for myself was that it's a very, even though it's a 2D work, it's a very tactile image. And in itself, it is very multisensory. You can imagine the smells of this location. You can imagine, it's these bright pinks, these dark contrasting lines to create these figures. And I actually thought that within that, I would probably create a collage in a way as kind of a tactile board to be able to get the different layers of that work. Because there are so many, and using different surfaces to replicate the experience in a way. But I'm really going to be considering it a lot more because I have never worked with that painting myself. But that was just the first thing that came to mind, was as a way to create the layers within that space and get the sense of flatness and dimension that Picasso is working with and using.
I actually had the same reaction as Olivia. I was wondering if you guys chose that because that was a painting not in any of our respective collections. Maybe. And again, Danielle and I, my colleague at the museum, we gave that a whole lot of thought. And the one thing we came up with was that Picasso, of course, is really breaking all of the elements of the figures down into shapes. So, thinking that one of the most fundamental ways to describe anything is a shape, and we don't usually think of describing human form in shapes. So that might be a really good way to access all of the figures and all of the forms. With regard to describing that painting to someone who has never had sight, as opposed to describing it to someone who had lost sight, that actually stymied us a little bit as well, because we really try to make all of our tours accessible to all of our visitors and not modify as much as possible, no matter what your level of vision is. Or we were thinking that one difference we might make is we might make fewer visual references to objects in the world for people who have never had sight. So rather than saying the background looks like a broken mirror, to really get even more descriptive and really say it looks like the background of the painting looks like a broken mirror in terms that it has lots of jagged, irregular shapes, and to really make it very specific instead of using those kind of metaphorical kind.
I was thinking about the rhythm of the painting and how it's got, like people were saying, sharp. It has shapes, but the shapes are very sharp, kind of staccato. And to me, that painting has a lot of sound. So I might talk about it in terms of rhythm and repetition and sharp edges, kind of coming right next to each other. And I was also thinking, Rebecca and I were talking before about how Cubism unfolds. It's time unfolding in a single frame, and how I often use Dora Maar in an armchair, a Picasso painting at the Met, where she's facing the front and she's facing the side, and her eye is upside down, and just that idea of movement, tracing movement. And we do that, for example, the drawing on the lower right here, there's a drawing on the wall from our Scene for Drawing class that shows hands in different positions, and it's almost like it shows the hand moving in space. And so how Cubist paintings show people moving in space, and I love the simultaneity of Les Demoiselles and of Cubism, and I think that whole idea of compressing time into a frame is exciting. I also wanted to say that with our audiences, we often don't know their story. A person might come to us. We don't know for how long their vision has been impaired, and so we frequently don't take that into account because we don't ask unless the person volunteers that information and they don't know.
I guess I'd just add that in that conversation, you find out more and learn about person's maybe what they can and can't see, but also what their interests are. What aspects of that particular painting are they interested in? And I guess finally, just following on from what Pamela was saying about Cubism, I sometimes think of Cubism as in a way similar to touching an object. A Cubist painting shows you not only kind of multiple times, but multiple perspectives. And when you touch an object, you're touching it from multiple sides. And usually in a painting that's realistically rendered, you get one side, one viewpoint, but when you touch, you get multiple viewpoints, if you like, at once. And so Cubist painting, to me, is sort of like the experience of touch in painted form. So it's just another perspective.
I would also add that if it's a painting like this, where it might be particularly difficult to describe all aspects of it, we may go so far as to have people take positions so you understand where each of the figures might be in the painting. And we would also bring along, if we can find them, any kind of object that might allow them to touch and handle and experience without wounding them, but that kind of jagged, planar aspect that we find in a painting like that. And we just sort of rack our brains to seek out anything tangible that we can add to the verbal description.
I just wanted to add one thing relating to materials. I would also say that when you're describing a painting, you're describing usually paint on a canvas that's stretched on a wooden frame, and that aspect, including that aspect in the description, is important. So we might have pieces of canvas that are stretched and unstretched, which we have available so that people can understand the construction. We're not looking out a window at the Demoiselles d'Avignon. We're looking at a piece of canvas with paint on it. So just helping through handling materials to understand the physicality of the object as well as what it's showing.